The mockery begins. The giant space station floated quietly at the edge of the galaxy, like a forgotten metal city among the stars. It was called Varrock's Pride, home to hundreds of alien races. Traders, warriors, and mercenaries from every corner of the universe gathered here. Among them was a young human engineer named Corin Vale. Corin was different. Smaller than the bulky alien species, weaker looking than the strong warriors, and slower compared to the quick hunters. Wherever he walked, alien eyes followed him, not with respect but with laughter. Look at the little human. Did he get lost from his daycare? Maybe we should get him a toy hammer. The aliens mocked him openly. Some even threw small tools at his feet, pretending he was their cleaner. Corin kept his head down, fixing broken pipes, damaged doors, and old machines. He needed the money. He needed to survive. But today, things were different. A large crowd had gathered in the central square of the station. A loud voice echoed through the air. "Attention, attention," shouted Commander Yakar, a tall, gray-skinned alien warrior wearing shining armor. "We have a new challenge for today, a test of real skill, not for children, and not for weaklings." The crowd cheered and roared. Corin was just passing by carrying a heavy toolbox when Commander Yakar spotted him. "You there, human," Yakar shouted, his voice full of amusement. "You like fixing things, don't you?" Corin stopped. All eyes turned to him. His heart sank. He knew they were setting him up for another joke, but he could not refuse. Refusing meant disrespect, and disrespect on Varrock's Pride could cost him his life. "Yes, sir," Corin said, forcing a steady voice. Yakar's smile widened cruelly. "Then we have the perfect task for you. There's an old ship, a piece of garbage floating in Dock 17. It's dead. Broken beyond repair. We call it the graveyard bird. Many have tried to wake it, all have failed." The crowd laughed again. "If you can fix even a single system on that ship," Yakar said loudly, "you will earn enough credits to live like a king for a month. But if you fail, you will crawl back here like the worm you are." The aliens howled with laughter. Corin's face burned red, but he stayed calm. He simply nodded. "I'll try," he said softly. "Try?" Yakar bellowed. "He says he'll try. Let's give the little human some encouragement." Yakar tossed an old rusty wrench at Corin's feet. Others followed, throwing broken tools and shouting insults. Corin bent down silently, picked up the wrench, and walked toward Dock 17. Hands trembled, not with fear but with anger. The halls leading to Dock 17 grew darker and colder. The station lights flickered. Few came this way. Most called it cursed. Ships abandoned here were left to rot for centuries. Finally, Corin stood before the forgotten ship. It was massive, blackened from age, with strange markings carved into its sides. Some parts looked almost melted. Others were covered with strange vine-like growths. Corin took a deep breath and stepped inside. The air was thick and musty. The metal under his boots creaked with each step. His flashlight flickered across broken panels, dead screens, and shattered glass. He moved carefully, his footsteps echoing in the ghostly silence. As he reached what seemed like the control room, something strange happened. His flashlight flickered again, but this time it wasn't the battery. The walls themselves began to glow faintly, tracing strange patterns of light across the metal. Symbols he could not understand pulsed gently, as if alive. Corin's heart pounded. He approached the main console and wiped the dust away. Beneath the dirt was a symbol he had never seen before, a golden bird with outstretched wings surrounded by stars. Without thinking, he touched it. Nothing happened. He sighed and turned away, but as he did, the console beeped softly. Lights came alive, screens blinked on, and an ancient voice whispered through the speakers. Human presence detected. Initiating legacy protocol. Corin froze. Behind him, a large door creaked open slowly, revealing a long corridor bathed in golden light. At the end of the corridor, Something was standing upright. Something powerful. Something waiting. Corin swallowed hard and stepped forward, drawn by a strange force he could not resist. He had no idea that this step would change his fate, and the fate of the entire galaxy, forever. The forgotten ship's secret. The golden-lit corridor stretched before Corin like a tunnel to another world. Every step he took echoed loudly against the ancient metal walls. The light was soft but alive, pulsing slowly, almost as if the ship itself was breathing. Corin's heart hammered in his chest. He tightened his grip on the rusty wrench he still held, feeling small and powerless against whatever lay ahead. Yet, something deep inside him, a whisper in his blood, urged him forward. He reached the end of the corridor. A massive chamber opened before him. It was unlike anything Corin had ever seen. The walls were smooth, shining black, covered with elegant, flowing patterns. In the center of the chamber stood a raised platform, and on it, displayed like a treasure, was a suit of armor. But this was no ordinary armor. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The plates were black with golden edges, polished, yet somehow ancient. The helmet had a long, thin crest like a burning flame frozen in metal. Tiny blue lights glowed in the joints and the chest. Around the armor the air shimmered, as if it rejected the dust and decay surrounding the rest of the ship. Corin stepped closer, his mouth dry. As he approached, the ship spoke again, this time louder, stronger. Genetic match confirmed. Activation sequence initiated. The platform lit up and beams of light scanned Corin from head to toe. He tried to back away, but an invisible force locked him in place. Energy wrapped around him like vines, cold and hot at the same time. Panic rose in his chest. He yanked at his legs. He shouted, but the ship didn't stop. Symbols around the room burned brighter, faster. Strange images flashed across the walls. Humans in golden armors leading armies, standing victorious over alien worlds, their banners flying under alien suns. Corin's mind whirled. What was this place? Why was it showing him this? The armor on the platform began to move. First the fingers flexed slowly, then the arms lifted. The chest plate split open silently, revealing a hollow space. A space perfectly shaped for a human body. Corin knew he should run. Everything told him to escape. But his feet carried him forward, as if pulled by invisible hands. He stepped onto the platform. The moment he touched the surface, the armor sprang to life. Pieces floated up and locked onto his body with magnetic precision. One by one, the armor sealed around him. Boots, greaves, chestplate, gauntlets, and finally the helmet, closing around his head with a loud clang. For a terrifying moment, Corin couldn't breathe. Then, everything changed. The helmet's display flickered on, showing data he couldn't understand. Symbols, coordinates, enemy profiles, strength readings, energy levels, and a voice spoke directly into his mind. Welcome, Commander of the First Flame. Your awakening is long overdue. Corin gasped. Suddenly he could feel the armor like it was part of his skin. His muscles felt stronger, his senses sharper. He could hear the tiny crackle of electricity in the air, feel the temperature of the metal under his boots, and see details far beyond human limits. The ship itself seemed to react. Engines that had slept for centuries rumbled weakly to life. Lights along the hallways blinked on. Broken panels repaired themselves with glowing liquid metal. Corin staggered back, overwhelmed. What is happening to me? He whispered inside the helmet. The voice answered, You are the last of the Flameborn. The galaxy abandoned you. The others forgot your strength. But now, you rise again. Corin tried to process the words, but before he could think too much, a warning flashed across his visor. Hostile life forms approaching. Defense systems offline. Prepare for combat. Corin turned sharply. Through the ship's broken viewports, he saw shadows moving. Figures with guns, armor, and sharp claws. The aliens from Varrock's Pride had followed him. They had seen him sneak into the forbidden ship. Now they had come to drag him out, or worse. Corin clenched his fists. The armor responded. humming with hidden energy. He could feel power building in his arms, his legs, his chest. Power enough to tear through walls if he wished. For the first time in his life, Corin was not the prey. He was the storm. The door behind him shook violently as the aliens pounded on it. Corin's lips curled into a smile inside the helmet. Let them come. This time, he was ready. The armor awakens. The door shuddered again, harder. This time. Outside, Corin could hear angry alien voices barking orders. They were arming themselves. Heavy footsteps stomped closer. Blades scraped against the floor. The aliens weren't here to arrest him. They were here to tear him apart. Corin's mind raced. A few days ago, he would have frozen in fear. A few hours ago, he would have run. But now, the armor pulsed around him like a living thing, filling him with courage, strength, and something darker. A deep ancient fury. The armor's voice spoke calmly in his mind. Hostile forces detected. Authorization granted for defensive protocols. Shall we proceed? Corin barely had time to answer before the door exploded inward. A blast of smoke and sparks filled the air. Through the smoke, figures charged, 6 alien warriors, tall and heavily armed, their armor plates clanking, their glowing weapons raised high. Corin stood completely still. The first alien lunged at him with a roaring battle cry, swinging a plasma axe. Corin didn't think, he moved. Faster than he believed possible, he dodged to the side. The world around him seemed to slow down. He could see the heat trails of the axe slicing through the air, the beads of sweat on the alien's forehead, the tiny cracks in the warrior's armor. With almost no effort, Corin raised his hand. An energy blast shot from his palm, striking the attacker square in the chest. The alien flew backward, slamming against the far wall with a sickening crunch, his weapon clattering to the floor. The other warriors hesitated, shocked. Corin stepped forward, armored boots pounding the floor with thunderous force. 2 more aliens fired their blasters. Corin raised his forearm and a shimmering shield of light formed instantly. The blast struck the shield and ricocheted harmlessly into the ceiling. Corin leapt forward with inhuman speed. He grabbed one alien by the arm and hurled him across the room like a rag doll. The second tried to retreat, but Corin punched forward. A massive energy fist formed around his real one and smashed into the alien's chest plate, sending him crashing into a broken control panel. Only 3 remained now, and they were terrified. They had come expecting a weak human boy. What they found was a force of nature wrapped in ancient steel. One alien, a brute twice Corin's size, roared in rage and charged. Corin crouched low, then sprang upwards like a missile, crashing into the alien with a devastating uppercut. The brute was lifted clean off his feet and hurled backward through 2 metal walls. The other 2 dropped their weapons and ran. Corin didn't chase them. He stood alone in the ruined chamber, breathing heavily, the armor humming softly around him. The ship's voice spoke again. Combat efficiency, 96%. Damage sustained, minimal. Suit synchronization, improving. Corin stared at his armored hands, flexing his fingers. It felt good. Too good. The armor was not just protecting him. It was awakening something inside him. A strength, a confidence, a hunger for more. He walked back to the central console. The holograms were alive again, showing star maps, ship, schematics, weapon systems. The ship wasn't dead anymore. It was waking up, just like him. A new screen blinked to life before him. Command code required. Initiate ship restoration? Corin hesitated. If he accepted, there would be no turning back. He would not just be an engineer, not just a survivor. He would be something else, something greater. Outside the broken windows, he saw more ships gathering, bigger ones, armed ones. The aliens were preparing a full assault now. He smiled inside the helmet. Initiate, he said. The ship rumbled under his feet. Power surged through its veins. Engines that had been dead for centuries growled back to life. The entire structure vibrated as ancient defense turrets unfolded from hidden panels, scanning and locking onto targets. On his visor, the ship's systems aligned with his armor. They were one now. Commander Corin Vale of the First Flame. The forgotten ship was no longer just a tomb. It was a war machine, and it answered to him. The station had laughed at a human. Now they would face the storm they had awoken, and there would be no mercy. First taste of power, the forgotten ship shook violently as its engines roared back to life after centuries of silence. Ancient weapons slid out from hidden doors, locking onto the growing fleet outside. The station's defense alarm screamed across Varrock's Pride, and panic exploded among the aliens. Inside the control chamber, Corin stood tall, armored, and ready. On his visor, hundreds of red dots blinked. Enemy ships, enemy warriors. They were mobilizing everything against him. Fighters launched from the docks. Heavy cruisers turned their guns toward the old ship, and squads of armed mercenaries rushed through the station's hallways toward Dock 17. Corin's heart should have been pounding with fear, but instead, it was steady, cold, focused. The armor whispered to him, guiding his hands, feeding him old battle knowledge. He wasn't alone. He was standing on the shoulders of ancient warriors, and their power flowed through him now. A soft, mechanical voice in his helmet spoke. Primary weapons online. Shields restored to 70%. Tactical options: evade, engage, dominate. Corin smiled. Dominate, he said calmly. The ship answered with a roar. Twin beams of searing golden energy blasted from hidden cannons, slicing through the enemy's forward fighters. Ships exploded like fireworks, debris raining down on the station's surface. The mercenaries outside Dock 17 tried to breach the ship with plasma cutters. Corin pressed his palm against the console. Outside, small automated turrets sprang from the ship's belly, firing precise energy bursts. One by one, the mercenaries fell, stunned or thrown backward, weapons flying from their hands. Inside the station's command center, alarms blared. Commander Yikar, red with rage and disbelief, slammed his fist onto the control panel. "What is that thing?" he roared. It's just the human," one officer stammered. "No human can do this," Yikar barked. "That ship, it's supposed to be dead." But the station's sensors told the truth. The ancient ship was not dead. It was alive, and it was angry. Back inside the ship, Corin moved like a force of nature. Doors obeyed his slightest gesture. Weapon systems responded to his thoughts. It was like wearing the body of a god. Still, he knew the enemy was adapting. Bigger warships, bristling with heavy cannons, now turned toward him. Yikar had called reinforcements. Tougher, meaner mercenaries. Corin needed to act before they boxed him in. He turned to the ship's AI. "Can we move?" Affirmative. Thrusters and partial drives operational. Suggestion: rapid departure followed by precision strike. Corin nodded. "Do it." The ship lurched forward, lifting off the crumbling dock with a deafening boom. Dock 17's entire structure cracked under the pressure. Corin guided the ship out of the hangar and straight into the open void above the station. Enemy ships swooped in, surrounding him like wolves around a wounded deer. Multiple targets locked, the AI said calmly. Corin narrowed his eyes. Fire everything. The old ship unleashed its fury. Missiles, plasma beams, kinetic slugs, ancient weapons far more advanced than anything the station had, tore through the enemy fleet. Ships spun out of control. Engines burst into flames, armor crumpled like paper. Within minutes, the open space around Varrock's Pride turned into a floating graveyard. But Corin wasn't done. He spotted Yikar's personal flagship, a monstrous, black cruiser with crimson markings, preparing to fire a heavy railgun. The weapon charged, crackling with deadly energy. Corin's instincts screamed. The armor responded instantly, calculating angles, speeds, weaknesses. He pushed the ship into a dive, dodging the railgun's blast by inches. The energy beam scraped the side of the old ship, but shields held. Corin spun the ship in a tight arc, dodging more fire, and came up behind Yikar's cruiser. He targeted the main engine core and fired a single piercing shot. The blast ripped through the cruiser's underbelly, Yakar's flagship erupted into a massive ball of flame, breaking apart and vanishing into the void. In the station's command center, those who once laughed at Corin watched in horror. The boy they had mocked was now a legend in living armor, and they had made him their enemy. Corin's ship floated triumphantly above the station, smoking and scarred but victorious. Inside the cockpit, Corin sat back in his chair, breathing hard. The AI spoke softly. "Dominance established. Awaiting further instructions, Commander." Corin stared down at the sprawling space station. He could leave now, disappear into the stars, free and powerful. Or he could show them what it meant to mock a human. The choice was his. He smiled under his helmet, a cold, dangerous smile. "Prepare landing sequence," he said. "We're not done yet." The humbling of the proud. The battered ship descended slowly onto Varrock's Pride. The station's surface, once busy with laughing merchants and proud warriors, now stood eerily silent. Smoke drifted through broken towers. Emergency lights blinked across the metal streets. Where once they had pointed and laughed at a human, now they watched in fear. The ship's landing gear touched down with a heavy thud. Hydraulic steam hissed from under the hull. For a few seconds there was only silence, as if the entire station held its breath. Then, the ramp slowly lowered. Out stepped Corin. Clad in the ancient black and golden armor, he looked like a being, carved from the very heart of a dying star. His presence seemed heavier than gravity itself. Each step he took echoed like a drumbeat of fate. The armor system scanned the area silently. Threats detected, minimal. Psychological impact, extreme. Recommendation, proceed. Corin walked toward the central plaza, the same place where aliens had once tossed broken tools at his feet, the same place where Yakar had mocked him in front of thousands. He would return there, not as a joke, but as judgment. Word spread like fire across the station. The human is coming. The graveyard bird has risen. Run! Hide! Some locked their doors. Some fell to their knees in prayer. Some gathered weapons. But their hands trembled too much to hold them steady. At the central plaza, a hurried gathering had formed. Warriors, merchants, officers, and thugs alike. And at the center, waiting nervously, was Commander Yakar. His armor was dented and scorched from his ship's destruction. His proud banners were torn. His once arrogant face was pale with fear. But still, he clung to pride. He drew his energy, blade, a long, curved weapon that hummed with deadly power. "He's just one human," Yakar growled to the crowd. "We are many. Remember your strength. Remember who you are." Some aliens cheered weakly. Most simply looked at each other, unsure. Then, Corin entered the plaza. The crowd fell into complete silence. The moment they saw him, glowing eyes behind a black and golden mask, ancient armor shining despite the smoke, their courage broke. Even the strongest among them felt a deep, ancient fear awaken inside their bones. Corin stopped a few feet away from Yakar. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Corin spoke, his voice deep and powerful, carried by the armor systems to every corner of the plaza. "You mocked a human," he said. "You called me weak, fragile, worthless." He lifted his armored hand. With a flick of his fingers, the ground at Yakar's feet cracked open with a blast of invisible force, sending the alien stumbling backward. "You forgot your own history," Corin said. "You forgot the ones who ruled the stars before you ever learned to walk." Corin stepped forward slowly. Yakar gritted his teeth and charged, roaring like a cornered beast. His energy blade slashed toward Corin's head. Without blinking, Corin caught the blade between his armored palms. The sword crackled and hissed, and then shattered into pieces. The crowd gasped. Yakar fell to his knees, wide-eyed with terror. Corin lowered his hand, pointing at him. "You wanted me to crawl," Corin said. "Now, you will kneel." Yakar, trembling, dropped his broken sword and bowed his head. One by one, the others followed. Aliens from every corner of the plaza. Warriors who had fought in 10 battles. Merchants who had built empires. All dropped to their knees before the armored human. Some placed their weapons on the ground as offerings. Some pressed their foreheads to the metal floor. Some simply wept, overcome by fear and regret. Above them, the great banners of Varrock's pride hung in ruins, and at the center of it all stood Corin, silent and unmoving, the new master of a place that once scorned him. Far above, in secret command towers, other leaders watched the scene unfold through surveillance feeds. "Impossible," whispered a reptilian general. "He is the Flame-born," muttered an ancient scholar. "If one human can do this," said another voice, trembling, "what happens if more awaken?" Across distant star systems, encrypted signals were sent, whispers of a new power rising, a forgotten race returning to claim its birthright, and in the middle of it all, a once-mocked boy who now wore the storm like a second skin. Corin stood, quietly, feeling the eyes of a broken station upon him. The armor's voice spoke once more in his mind. "Phase 1 complete. Awaiting your command, Commander." Corin looked around at the kneeling aliens, at the city of ruins, at the stars above, and for the first time he realized this was only the beginning. The galaxy had forgotten the strength of humanity. He would make them remember. One star at a time. The truth about humanity. The plaza remained frozen in silence. Corin stood tall, the ancient armor gleaming under the broken station lights. Around him, proud alien warriors, once full of arrogance and laughter, now knelt with bowed heads. They all knew now, something ancient had returned. But Corin himself still didn't understand everything. Why him? Why did this armor choose him? What was this hidden history? The answers were close. He could feel it, humming in the air like a coming storm. A slow, deliberate sound broke the silence. Footsteps. Not the heavy boots of warriors, but the soft tapping of cane against metal floor. Corin turned to see a figure approaching. An old alien scholar, his long, tattered robes, dragging behind him, his eyes deep with centuries of knowledge. His skin was wrinkled. A faded blue-gray and strange tattoos glowed faintly on his forehead. Around him walked two younger scribes, carrying ancient scrolls and glowing data tablets. The old scholar stopped a few feet away from Corin, then dropped to one knee, bowing low. "Forgive us, Flameborn," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "I don't want your apologies," Corin said firmly, his voice echoing through the plaza. "I want the truth." The old scholar lifted his head slowly, his eyes filled with sorrow. "You deserve to know," he said. "You must know." He motioned to his scribes, who activated a small holographic device. Above them, a three-dimensional image appeared, spinning slowly. A map of the galaxy, but not as it was now. This map showed human empires, vast glittering networks of stars, once dominating half the galaxy. Humans were not weak. Humans were not lost. They were kings, builders, warriors, and guardians. Thousands of years ago, humanity had discovered a technology that allowed them to bond with living armor, the flame-born armors, weapons of unimaginable power. With these they brought order, peace, and, when needed, unstoppable war. Aliens of all races once served under human banners, not by force but by admiration and loyalty. Humans were protectors of the galaxy, until betrayal came. The hologram shifted, showing a terrible war. Jealous races, fearful of humanity's strength, secretly united. Through trickery and sabotage, they turned the galaxy against humans. In a single brutal uprising, the human empire was shattered. The Flameborn were hunted down. Their armors were hidden or destroyed. Their history was erased from memory, buried under lies. Humanity was forced to retreat to the outer edges of the galaxy, scattered, broken, and forgotten. Generations passed, and the galaxy began to believe its own lies, that humans were weak, that they were never great, that they were nothing but dust under alien boots until now, until Corin. Corin listened in stunned silence, Anger burned in his chest, not just for himself, but for every ancestor who had died without honor, for every human who had been spat on, mocked, and forgotten. You knew, Corin said bitterly. You all knew. The old scholar bowed his head. Some of us remembered. Quietly, secretly. Forbidden to speak, he said. But when the ancient armor woke, we knew your time had come. Corin clenched his fists. The armor pulsed, sensing his rising fury. Why me? He demanded. I'm no king, no warrior. I'm just a nobody. The old scholar smiled sadly. That's what makes you worthy, he said. The true Flameborn were never chosen for pride, wealth, or bloodlines. They were chosen for spirit, for heart, for the fire inside that refuses to die. Corin felt the weight of the words settle on his shoulders. He was not just wearing armor. He was carrying the legacy of an entire fallen people. And now, the galaxy watched him once more. Not with mockery, but with fear and wonder. A low rumble shook the ground. Corin's visor blinked red. Warning. Incoming long-range fleet detected. Estimated time to contact, 40 minutes. The old scholar looked up sharply. They know, he whispered. Who knows? Corin asked, turning toward him. The old enemies, the scholar said. The same ones who betrayed your kind long ago. They feel the awakening. They will not allow you to rise again. Corin stared out across the stars. Ships were coming. Bigger, stronger, more ruthless than anything Varroc's pride had faced before. They would come to crush him, to bury the truth once again. But this time, Corin would not kneel. He turned to the kneeling crowd around him. Listen to me, he said, his voice cutting through the plaza like a blade. You wanted someone to laugh at. Now you have someone to follow. He raised his armored hand toward the sky. The galaxy tried to erase us. They tried to silence us. But we are still here. And we are not done yet. The ground trembled again. The first dark shapes of enemy ships appeared in the far reaches of space. Corin's armor hummed with power. His ship, the Graveyard Bird, awaited his command. The battle for humanity's future was about to begin. And this time, the galaxy would remember the name of Corin Vale. Rise of a legend. The stars above Varroc's pride shimmered, and then were swallowed by shadows. Hundreds of enemy ships poured from hyperspace like a black tide, surrounding the station. Their weapons bristled, their engines burned like hungry beasts. These were not merchants or mercenaries, these were destroyers, elite warships of the ancient betrayers, the ones who had crushed humanity long ago. Now they had come again. And this time they would show no mercy. Inside the battered station, Corin stood atop the ruined plaza, the wind tugging at the edges of his black and gold armor. The surviving aliens, the ones who once mocked him, now looked up at him with fear, and hope mixed in their eyes. The old scholar stepped forward, bowing deeply. We are with you, Flameborn, he said. The other aliens, one by one, stood tall, clutching weapons, shields, and scraps of armor. They were broken, scared, but ready. Corin stared at the dark fleet above. He knew the truth. They couldn't win by numbers. They couldn't win by strength alone. But they could win by spirit. The same spirit that had once made humanity rulers of the stars. The armor's voice whispered in his mind. Command recognized. Activating full Flameborn protocol. A surge of pure power rushed through Corin's body, burning brighter than any star. The ancient ship, the Graveyard Bird, responded to. Panels across its hull opened. Hidden energy cannons unfolded. Old systems, once considered dead, roared back to life at his call. The station trembled as the ancient human war technology fully awakened. It was no longer a forgotten ship. It was a weapon of legend, reborn. Above, the enemy ships began to fire. Brilliant beams of death streaked through the void, racing toward the station. Corin reacted instantly. He leapt high into the air, impossibly high, the armor boosting him upwards like a missile. He slammed his fist into the ground as he landed, creating a wave of protective energy that spread out, shielding the plaza and the people behind him. The first salvo of enemy fire struck and shattered harmlessly against the energy shield. Aliens behind him gasped in amazement. For the first time, they believed. For the first time, they fought not because they feared him, but because they trusted him. Corin turned toward them. "No more running," he said, voice deep and commanding. "No more kneeling." He pointed toward the sky. "Today, we show them what happens when you try to erase humanity." The plaza roared with battle cries. The battle began. Corin led the charge. He blasted into the sky, weaving through enemy fire, faster than the eye could follow. Each punch from his armored fists tore through enemy fighters. Each blast from his palms disabled cruisers. The graveyard bird unleashed its fury too, firing massive beams that cut through battleships like they were made of paper. The enemy commanders, watching from their bridges, shouted in disbelief, "It's just one human, one. How can he stand against us?" But it wasn't just one human anymore. It was one human, and the spirit of every ancestor behind him. It was one human, and a station of aliens who had remembered their courage. Corin fought like a force of nature. He smashed into the command ship, ripping through its hull, tearing down its weapons with his bare hands. Inside, terrified officers surrendered without a fight. In every corner of the battle, the enemy fleets cracked and splintered, their formations falling apart. At last, only the enemy flagship remained, a monstrous titan of metal and rage. Cannons locked onto the station, preparing one final devastating blast. Corin knew, if that shot landed, everything would be lost. He clenched his fists, gathering every drop of energy the armor could give him. "This ends now," he growled. With a roar, he launched himself forward, faster than light, faster than thought, a burning comet of human will. The enemy flagship fired. A beam of blinding destruction tore through space toward Varrock's Pride. But Corin was faster. He slammed into the beam with his full armor shield at maximum, diverting its deadly force with a blast of golden light. The enemy ship cracked apart from its own power, tearing into pieces and exploding into 1,000 dying suns. Silence fell. The battlefield was empty, the enemy was gone, and humanity had risen again. Corin landed gently on the plaza's cracked surface. His armor, scorched and battered, still gleamed like a crown of fire. The aliens rushed toward him, cheering, shouting, crying. They lifted their weapons high, not in war, but in salute. Across the galaxy, hidden watchers recorded the moment. Across distant worlds, suppressed human bloodlines felt something awaken. A voice whispered through the stars. "The Flameborn have returned." Corin lifted his visor, revealing his human face, young, determined, and proud. He raised his fist high into the burning sky, a symbol, a promise, a legend reborn.